I'm Danielle Cummings, and I am an English teacher here at Notre Cristo High School. Well, it's really hard to get students to be engaged with writing sometimes, and this session was a really unique opportunity for them to have a low-stakes environment, it was outside of the classroom, where they were really actually inspired to write. It was, they were listening to somebody who shared their culture, who shared their hometown, who was actually from Lawrence. And by listening to his examples and through his confident nature, he was really able to inspire the kids to try to write something. And that's the hardest part, is just to get them started. And once the kids actually started writing something, they all left the session with something on a piece of paper. And we went back to English class, and using what they wrote during the session, they responded to 2 different prompts that Roberto was talking about. And each student chose one prompt, and they were asked to keep writing and to complete their poem based off of one of the prompts that they had in the session. And every single one of my students, regardless of whether they like reading or writing throughout the year, were able to write a full poem. They really dug deep, and they were writing about personal things. And for most of them, it was by far the best example of creative writing that I'd seen from them this year. So that really goes to show that they were, motivated by Roberto and by the session to write, and they were able to give themselves a chance to open up. Yes, so I had them, write the poems. Each of them wrote a poem when we came back to class. And I also had them write a short reflection, kind of like an explanation of their poem and what it meant to them. And one of my students in particular, in their reflection, said something very honest about how she had never really considered the fact that being bilingual had affected her so much. One of the prompts that Roberto had talked about was their language, and how their words felt coming out of their mouths. And a lot of the kids played with that idea, and this student in particular expressed that she really felt like she learned something about herself, and she hadn't realized how being bilingual had affected her, and so she was able to make a self-discovery through that process. Fostering a love of literacy is hard, and it takes a certain personality. It takes a lot of energy. And Roberto, as soon as we got in the room, I knew, or I was expecting him to be a certain type of way because his writing was so powerful, but he really is a powerful presence. He was bold and confident, but he was also very humble and genuine, honest. That really allowed them to connect with him, and I think open up and then be able to, reveal their raw selves also. The session with Roberto was kind of perfect. It came, I believe it was right at the beginning of April, which is National Poetry Month. So I was already thinking of doing poetry with the kids. Like I mentioned earlier, getting them to really get into reading and writing anything is hard, and especially poetry sometimes is hard to hook them. They hear poetry and they immediately think, boring, or I won't be able to understand it. So by being able to read these type of poems that they could all relate to, at least some of the poems each kid was really able to relate to and to understand. So it opened them up to the idea of actually writing their own poems and learning about other poets. I would definitely recommend Blue Ink to other schools. I would say especially in the greater Lawrence area. I worked at Lawrence Public Schools for a few years before coming to Notre Dame. I worked at a middle school, and I think middle schoolers and high schoolers alike would benefit so greatly from being able to hear just someone from the same place that they came from, who has a love of literacy, who used it to overcome his struggles. I just think he was so inspiring to our group of students, and there are so many students in Lawrence and the greater Lawrence area around here that would benefit from seeing someone that they can relate to and connect to and hearing his words in person. So I would definitely recommend the program. The students, I think, honestly, I would love to have Roberto, Germán come back because I saw them grow in their ability to write after just one short session. They were more open with their ideas. They were more willing to put their true selves on paper. Like I said, I was really surprised, honestly, by some of the things that I saw the kids write. They were being really true, like being really honest, I think, with what they were expressing. And continuing a type of workshop like that. So, I have tried in class on my own to continue that energy in a workshop. And, their development really just will continue the more that they practice. And I think the more that they get to read and to listen to, authors like Roberto that they feel connected to.